The Sports Source is brought to you by Fast Frame with Heather Whiteside art now available.
You are watching East Tennessee's first and only year-round sports talk show on television. This is The Sports Source with your host, John Pennington.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into The Sports Source. Glad to have you with us today. Vols didn't have a great day or great weekend at the NFL draft. We'll discuss that. We'll talk about just how bad it is. We'll break out once again. We do it every year, and people are always amazed by it, and they always tweet it around. So we'll break it out again. We'll update the Vol draft tracker over the last 24 years. It's not pretty. It's amazing where this slide began, and it's been a longer slide than you probably realize. We got tons of stuff to talk about today, including a salute to Peyton Manning later in the show, something that's running on television that I thought it was pretty impressive, so we're just going to run it here. Free ad for Gatorade. If you haven't seen the new Peyton Manning Gatorade ad, it's coming up later in the show. First segment of our program, let's get underway. It's brought to you by Tennova Healthcare. There aren't many times when you'll hear a talk show host actually tell you that a client saved their life. But that's what I'm going to tell you about Tennova Healthcare. They did that for me. When I faced a cancer scare 5 years ago, almost, they got me through it. You can't give a much better recommendation than saying, yeah, that's the group that saved my life. Tennova.com is where you can learn more. And, of course, Tennova Healthcare, best in town, best in the state. Save me. Trust them. All right. Want to welcome in this group of guys that I trust. Not necessarily with my life, but I do trust you. Bob Hodge.
Or your wallet.
Don't trust my wallet, that's right. Bob Hodge, Mike Strange, Vince Ferrara joins us, Chuck Cavaleris, and you guys will have graphics underneath. Any of you saying, where's my plug? Yeah. You're going to have a graphic underneath that explains exactly where people can find you and reach you. Okay, as I said, a bad day for bad week for the Vols. For the second year in a row, no Tennessee players drafted into the NFL. That is a record. First time that's happened since the draft began, or the selection meeting, or whatever they used to call it back in the day. It continues a dizzying fall from great heights that those of you from the late 90s and early 2000s remember. We do this every year. I mentioned it in the open. Here it is. It's the Vols draft chart. And let me explain what you're looking at here. All right. It's like a stock market. If you just looked at every year, you're going to see these ups and downs, really jagged jumps and falls. So what we do is we look in 4-year draft classes. So from 1990 to 93 over there on the left side, you had 17 people picked. From 91 to 94, you had 18 people picked, and so on. You can see, and by the way, the NFL did change to a 7-round draft somewhere in that mix. So all we've done in here, that's counted for. We're just looking at the guys drafted in the first 7 rounds, even back in 1990, 91. So it plays the same. But you see, it built to a huge 32 guys drafted in a 4-year span between 2000 and 2003. And then it started to drop in 2001 to 2004, down to 27 guys drafted, 23, 20, 18, 17, 15, 16, 12, 10, a little 13, 10, 8, 7. Gentlemen, those of you who lived through the heyday, did you ever think you would see Tennessee talent drop off to that extent? And again, we're talking now, you're talking about more than a decade in terms of slide. Now, you still had 27, 23 guys, but it went from 32 to 20 pretty quickly. Right there between 01 and 04, it started going off the table, and it's been going off the table ever since. Did you ever think you'd see something like that at Tennessee?
Do we need to talk, or can I just sit there and shake my head no?
Shaking your head works. It's quicker.
So somebody else can go ahead and shake.
I'm just amazed you could go 2 years in a row where you have, 210, 220 guys drafted each year.
Yeah.
So that's 400 and some guys been drafted the last 2 years, and not one of them from a program that still hadn't been terrible.
I think with compensatory picks, it's about 250 or so. So it's probably closer to 500, I think.
And so you got a team over there that, they haven't gone 0-14 or 0-12 or anything. Yeah, so I think it's amazing.
You went 9-4 last year with a team that didn't have a draft pick. Now, granted, there are people throwing things to their screen right now. You had Kurt Magid, who was injured. He would have been drafted if not hurt. And then you had 3 guys that came back. So
Yeah.
that did play a role into it. But guys, your thoughts on Tennessee not having anybody for a second straight year? Just the perception of it.
No, I mean, you used to have you had to have 2 people cover the draft because so many were going to go, and it was back to back, usually sometimes in the first round. And now you could just take the day off and then the next day off. And remember, this is the program that recruited nationally.
Yeah.
You know, and also, John, you know, it tells me the people who say, "Oh, the program wasn't in that bad of a shape." Yeah. Thank you, Derek Dooley. I mean, I attribute a lot of this directly to Derek Dooley.
That's a huge chunk of it, but again, the slide has been going. We've been seeing this going for a while now. Vince, your take on where things stood. I know you watched NFL Network.
Yeah.
For those that didn't, Charles Davis, the former Vol, was a co-anchor among their coverage. It became a running joke to the point that they were laughing out loud and rooting for other schools, other countries to get draftees over Tennessee because his alma mater didn't have any drafted. If you're a Tennessee fan, it had to enrage you because they're sitting there going, "Oh, it's Montana State. Montana's got a guy instead of Tennessee. Ha, ha, ha." And Davis just had to take it. The Vikings took a kid from Germany, and the response was, "Germany got a guy before Tennessee." The perception isn't good.
Baylor's basketball team.
Yeah.
You know, we heard.
Yeah.
The
Well,
long
while
snapper,
you
all
say
that.
this,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and put the graphics up here.
Yeah.
I think we've got one of these. I don't know if Oliver's found it or not, but there it is. Canada had a guy drafted. Germany, Division II had more people. FCS punters, long snappers, and then all 13 SEC teams. Vince, back to you and just the overall perception of this thing.
Yeah, I haven't been around quite as long as these guys, but I think part of it is also a redistribution of talent around college football. There's exceptions. There's the Powers, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, Clemson's coming on. But I think that part of it, too, is guys know now that they can go to FCS programs. They can go to the Group of 5 conference teams and still get to the NFL. So I think that plays into it a little bit, but certainly there's a lot of reasons for the decline.
Well, I think that certainly, and especially when you think about how many kids now think they want to come onto campus and play immediately.
Right.
I mean, they're selling that at the big boy schools. So if somebody's not going to play immediately at a big boy school and I can still get to the NFL and mom can still see every game on television, I'm going to South Florida instead of Tennessee.
Right.
Well, no, don't know what good ever came out of Tampa, but okay. Vince, of course, from Tampa. Thoughts?
Well, how much of it is that the guys that Tennessee signed, let's say these last 2 classes where no one got drafted, how much of it was Tennessee signed guys who just weren't as good? How much was it that you had coaches who didn't get the most out of these guys? And so, you know, you see Tennessee does have guys in the NFL who were signed as free agents.
Right.
They weren't drafted. They've got some guys who've gone to the NFL. Malik Jackson is a pretty obvious one who has gone on and done great things, much better than they did when they were at Tennessee. So was your coaching not only a problem not getting the talent in, was it also a problem that you weren't developing what you had very well?
One thing, good question. I think one thing that you saw yesterday that's a positive. Look, we're going to talk about this later in the show. We're going to run through the list of guys who could go next year, and it's a scary long list for Tennessee fans. But in addition to you're going to have guys drafted next year, one thing you didn't see yesterday in those highlights that you'd been getting used to the last couple of years, everybody you saw had a clip of them running over, through, or around Tennessee. You didn't see that this year. There were very few highlights of Tennessee in this draft at all because you weren't getting drafted, but on the plus side, it wasn't Alabama just beating the devil out of you like it has been the last few years where you were the human highlight reel creator. Yeah. And then one other thing we talked about, I wanted to touch on this. We talked about this last September. A lot of people didn't like hearing it, but we pointed out Tennessee has talent, but it's young talent.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between young talent and veteran talent. The last 2 years, Florida's beaten Tennessee. Beat them late. Florida's had 15 guys drafted the last 2 years, veteran guys. Tennessee has had 0. Veteran talent versus just talent. Now, that's pressure on Butch Jones and crew because this year, veteran talent's in Knoxville. All right, when we come back, more on the draft, more on Tennessee. A record was tied, and there was some irony in who tied it. We'll talk about the SEC draft. We'll talk about early entries. The 2 different angles of whether you should go early. We'll look at 2 guys from Tennessee, one who probably should have stayed, one who probably should have gone last year. We'll discuss that. Lots more to come on the Sports Source.